behind me was Hannah Gordon.
Okay.
Yeah, who tapped me on the shoulder and went, "You should come to my poetry night," and gave me all the details for Spoken Word London. And then I went to that, and you bounded up to me and went, "Oh, you're here. That's great. Are you performing?" And I was like, "Oh, this is really nice and welcoming. How lovely." He stopped glaring at me.
Hello and welcome to the Process Podcast. I don't have an intro because intros are not my thing. I just go into it, I ad-lib, I improv and all that stuff. But what I don't improv, what I don't properly improv on is my guests, because I plan those in advance and I make it happen. And this guest has been planned for a while, this level of making it happen, because life is a lot sometimes, so you have to make it fit in with life. But life has now worked for me to get Rebecca Cooney here.
Hello, that's a comforting lie. I just wandered in off the street. He just found me outside. I could be anyone.
You literally did wander in off the street. There might have been some planning in advance, but you did literally wander in off the street. But yes, how are you doing?
I'm all right. How are you?
I am doing okay. I have not broken. I almost broke my neck bringing a chair in today.
Okay.
Without going offensive on this, but I can make this reference level of, you know, the whole way that African women carrying pots and things on their heads, etc.
Yes.
Imagine me doing that with an IKEA office chair, because that was the easiest way for me to carry it. Of like, it was too awkward to hold in my hand, so if like it's on the head, we're doing it that way.
You know they only have like a pad of some sort when they're doing that.
Afro.
Okay, yeah, I didn't think that through.
But yeah, there was a lot of neck work there. I will enjoy the ergonomic chair to fix that afterwards. So I'm doing fine. But yes, as I like to start these podcasts off with, which I'm already regretting, is how did I first meet someone?
How did you first meet me? Yes.
Yes. So as this podcast and just my general vibe has kind of given off, I'm a bitch.
Yeah. Yeah.
When I first met Rebecca, I remember it was at a Farrago Slam at the Poetry Cafe. I went there with my friend Iris, and for our context, Iris is a stereotypically French woman.
She is. She's very. Is she from Paris? She's very Parisian.
Yeah, she is.
She's very Parisian. Yeah. Like she's just. I
don't want to play into stereotypes all the time, but also no, she is
just effortlessly chic.
Yeah.
And yes.
Brilliant. And I can't remember a lot of stuff happens in Paris. I can't remember which one it was.
I think it was after the Bataclan attacks.
Yes. It was after that, etc. And because we are both jaded poets who've been on the scene so often, there's so many times when you get a poet go up and go, "I'm going to talk about the thing that's in the news now." And it's like, but you have no relation to it other than you're just talking about it, kind of thing. So when you went up there, you did a poem about the 3-day beard, and like literally like me and Iris in the front row, because we were stuck in the front row, kind of thing, with this like just judgment and like, okay, cool, like okay,
just these two faces,
come on, white woman, show me why you're doing this poem.
Good. Yes.
And then there was the thing of like, okay, actually was good. There actually is a reason why you're doing this. Okay, I can like find this is not just a white woman being saviour. This is actually. Well, I see how it relates to your life at this moment in time. Fair enough. Fine. You're fine.
Yes. Yeah. Actually, that was good. It's the highest form of praise Tyrone gives. It turns out.
Honestly, yes.
If he says it out the side of his mouth, it means he really means it.
No, when Kayla was asking for her first book quote, so for Tikva, my first comment back was genuinely not shit. Which admittedly I did as a joke first, but she kept it.
Yeah, don't go toe to toe with Kayla on those sorts of things. Like, you'll lose.
I was literally joking about that, but no, that was I believe how we first. But then from then it's just been open mics and whatnot since then, and you've become a part of the life.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, but rather than just how we met, we're going to go into all of things about you, as we're now going to have a nice intro card coming up as we go into our timeline section. And now we're in our timeline section, so very Ghost of Christmas, past, present, future, all of that. We are going for your past, present, and future. So, if memory serves, that Farrago Slam was one of the first times you were performing, yes?
Yes, it was the first time I performed in England. So, I discovered performance poetry as a thing at the 2012 Edinburgh Fringe. I was up there with some friends. I was recently heartbroken. I was probably a fucking pain in the ass to have around. And like when you're on the Edinburgh Fringe, you tumble out of a show at midnight and there'll be something else going on. And my friend saw a sign and it had Mark Grist performing. And he'd seen, the famous YouTube video with Mark Grist doing the rap battle with the guy who's young enough to be the student, and it got kind of billed as teacher versus student. My friend Joe had seen that, and it was a showcase with Mark Grist and Shane Koizan, and there might have been somebody else on the list, but I can't remember who it was.
It's a good showcase.
And yeah, it was really good. And it was just at midnight in the bottom of the underbelly, and Joe just grabbed me and goes, "We're going in here." And I was like, "Oh God, poetry," because like, at this point I'd done like a master's in English and I was still quite frightened of poetry. I don't think at the time it was necessarily taught brilliantly in schools. I think,
I mean, you say it at the time as if it's got much better.
I think it probably has got a little bit better, but yeah, I think there was still, I think, and I don't blame the teachers that I had for this actually, because I think they were great, but I think that sort of that exam focus, like what is the hidden meaning, like it made me feel like, oh, I just don't understand any of this and I'm just going to mentally, so I kind of went, oh, poetry, all right, fine. And then, of course, it was Mark Grist and Shane Koizan, and I went, I fucking love this. I want to know more about it. And then I came home and started Googling, and what came up was button poetry, which obviously is all US and Canada based. So I kind of got the idea that this performance poetry stuff was going on in the US and not really here so much. And then a couple of years later, I was in New York, and I thought, well, why don't I write one of these performance poems? And just go and do it. And if it flops, I'm thousands of miles away from home, or 1,000 miles away from home, and it doesn't matter if it's terrible. And if it's fun, it's fun, and we'll see.
So you started off international.
Yes, and I went to the New Yurican, which is like, because I'd seen the name on the button poetry thing, and I went, okay, I'll do that. Which, by the way, I would totally recommend, even if you're not a poet. I mean, if you're not a poet, it's just a very cool way to see New York. Like, we were stood in the queue, and there were just like these kids from Queens doing like practice rap battles with each other. Nice. It was really cool. And I thought, oh yeah, this is fun. I suppose I'll see if there's anything in London I could go to. I don't expect there is, but we'll have a look. And of course, you could basically go to one every night of the week. And so then online I found the Poetry Cafe, and they had this Farrago Slam. And I'd just seen the word slam on button poetry, and I thought it just meant poetry event. And I turned up and was like, what, why are they scoring people? What is it? And I think I came like third or something. I was like, oh, okay, this is quite good fun. And then, yes, you and Iris were sat in the front row. And then behind me was Hannah Gordon.
Okay.
Yeah, who tapped me on the shoulder and went, you should come to my poetry night, and gave me all the details for Spoken Word London. And then I went to that, and you bounded up to me and went, oh, you're here. That's great. Are you performing? And I was like, oh, this is really nice and welcoming. How lovely. He stopped glaring at me.
I mean, I don't want to say it helps the bitchy thing. Was level of like, there's the bitchy intro thing, and admittedly, if you are bad, you're still bad. If you're good, it's like, oh, well, you're fine now. You've passed the test now.
Oh, well, thank you. In fairness, I'm hamming it up. I don't think I'd spotted quite how unimpressed you and Iris were to start with. I don't think I'd quite clocked it because I was just so nervous. I was looking over your heads anyway. So, and that's, I think that's what I really love about the London poetry scene is you can go to a night and you'll make friends and they'll invite you to another night and another night, and it just, or certainly at that time, and I'm sure it's the same now. I just, I feel a bit more out of the loop post-pandemic, but yes, like I think that was just this incredible.
What has been really affirming to what the hell we're doing is me and Kayla have been like WhatsApping back and forth about stuff, and like one of the things we was WhatsApping about recently was like, because we had, so Fiona at the January process, and I'm dating because I don't know when I'm putting this fucking episode out, but the January process, was on stage talking about the fact that like when she first like to come into process, this was kind of the intro to her having friends in London properly and like having a social life in London, and it's like, oh shit, we're kind of responsible for that, and like thinking of like, we're probably responsible of this for a lot of people, and okay, we've properly built a community there, and like, I don't want to say we are the best at it or anything like that kind of thing. There were so many other nights doing so many different things, etc. But like, I am very glad that we've been able to build a community, and it's one of the things that seemingly has kept going. And kept building on things, right, that you can kind of trace it back from Forget What You Heard to Boomerang to Process, and to all these other nights that are kind of branching off it. And and I think I've had friends who've moved cities sort of in their early 30s or countries or whatever, and they've gone, actually, it's really fucking hard to make friends when you don't when you don't know people, or when you're not at school or college or university or you don't necessarily hang out with your workmates,
when you're at a certain age, what do you do? And I was like, you just rock up to a poetry night, and that's how you make friends. That's how
Yeah. No, I as people, Andy especially has calls me out on, is that there's definitely sometimes when I can take a while to actually befriend someone. Like it took a while from I've known Andy for a while, but it took a while from that getting to know to actually let's actually do things and talk more to each other. So I'm definitely a bit bad at that, but no, it is definitely a good scene for that. And I guess with the mention of pre and post pandemic stuff as well, like, where is your poetry at the moment? What are you doing with poetry at the moment? Whether it's just yourself as a poet or also the things you're doing, because you do more than just performing.
Yeah, so not as much as poetry as I'd like, if I'm honest. It's been my life's been a bit hectic the last 6 months or so. So, but yeah, I'm starting to sort of write a bit more again. I'm knocking around a collection title that was something a friend said in a text message. And I went, oh, that's the title of a collection, isn't it? And it's one of those things that's started out as a joke, and I've now been joking about it so long, I think, oh yeah, maybe.
Did I tell you my next collection title for collection of poems I have not even started to write yet?
Is it what I think it is?
I think it is, yeah.
Orphan Black?
Yes.
Yes, yeah.
I'm sticking with it. Don't care.
Fair. Absolutely fair.
I did run it by Mum first.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, I don't feel like she'd disapprove at all.
I think her only caveat was wait till she's not here before you write that.
That's fair.
Book.
Yeah,
not fair. That's a valid thing.
Yes, yeah.
But yeah, so you've got your collection title in mind, and just to write the collection.
Which I've never really done before, and I think that probably is a sort of... There's something about levelling up as a poet, right? That you go through different stages where you just, actually it's fairly easy when you start writing poetry because you're just like, oh, I have all these ideas. And I just, and actually some of them, like there are some poems that I wrote fairly early on that I don't perform anymore. But that poem that I wrote for the New Yorker was Fairy Tale Ending, which I still perform on the regular. And so there is some material from that time that I'm using. I'm starting to bore myself a bit, to be honest. Like I'm at the point where I'm like, okay, I've been performing these for quite a few years now. But I think, the kind of, I'm going to sit down and write a collection on these themes is something I haven't done before. It's previously just been, while I was writing what I was thinking about, and I'm going to try and find a way to thread them all together. Yeah. So my pamphlet, Where the Lights Come On, is very much sort of, it's kind of, optimism, that I come back to the theme of light a lot and mental health and stuff like that. But it's a little tangential for some of it, if I'm honest, some of the links between it. Whereas, I was sort of like, okay, maybe I set out to write a collection that explores different themes. We'll see. Maybe that will materialise, maybe it won't. But if I write some poems, then I have some poems, right?
The whole... That moment when you kind of go from my collection is just my greatest hits to my collection is actually telling a story. Wherever it is.
It's a project that I've kind of conceived from the start. I like both my collections. I'm aware that my first collection is more greatest hits and my second collection is more. There's a bit more of a theme going on here, despite the fact the first collection had my first time stories that kind of linked it all together, kind of thing. But that was very much a. Almost go in after the fact to make it all link together kind of vibe. Yeah, and I think yours is one of the best I've seen for that. Hannah Hutzper's also Permeable. She kind of linked everything through the Maslow's hierarchy of need.
Yes.
And it works really well.
Nice.
But it is very much, these are some poems I wrote. How do I organise them? And it looks really good. So I'm toying with that. I'm also I'm working on what I've been calling a longer fictional project as a sort of euphemism because the word novel is a bit scary. But yes, I'm sort of doing that as well.
Are you waiting for the NaNoWriMo to get it done kind of thing?
Yeah, maybe that's what I need to do. I mean, what I'm doing, maybe that is, and just be very public about it. Although I've tried to be very public about NaPoWriMo, which is the poems every day for April. And I usually drop off after about a week.
Oh, I mean, a lot of people, like, the best way to do a NaPoWriMo is have a group of poets in the same like WhatsApp group, Facebook group, whatever. That will make you feel guilty when you see them all posting and you haven't posted yet.
Peer pressure is actually a great motivator for writing, which is with the longer fictional project. I was mulling over the ideas for a long time, but then during lockdown I joined an online writing group for the course was called Fantastic Literature, so it was like not quite full-fledged fantasy, but stuff that is folklore influenced, magical realism, which is all where a lot of my poetry is. And I thought, okay, let's do that with prose. And there was this kind of like 6-8 week course, and then we all just got on so well, we've just kept up as a writing group. We just call ourselves the Fantastic Writers, just because. And that's every few weeks I have to submit a chapter, which means every few weeks I have to fucking write a fucking chapter to submit. And they're all such good writers that I'm sort of like just basically going, please like this. You're great. Please like my... And it works. I think, yeah, it's peer pressure will get stuff done.
Well, like, I feel like this is kind of leading into our future section. So, like, what are you looking for in terms of as a artist? So, what are the plan? Like, it sounds like obviously another collection would be a plan. But, like, are there any other goals in mind? Whether it... And obviously, you also got the podcast as well. So, like, are there any other goals of, like, where to take that or any other documenting? Or is it... Yeah, what's next for Rebecca?
What is next? I mean, like I say, I'm kind of coming out of a slightly hectic 6 months. The podcast Dead Darlings has been on hold for a bit. But that is supposed to be, there is an episode that has been recorded. I just haven't edited it yet.
Okay, I've got at the time of recording, which hopefully should be out by the time you're watching or hearing this, I've got 4 episodes.
That does make me feel better, yeah.
4 episodes that are just waiting there. One that's properly like fully done, just haven't put out yet. One that my guest has said they want to get rid of one section because they kind of dissed Nepo babies and now an actor. I need to be ever so slightly careful in the case of like, on the very, very off chance of some random cast director sees it and gets pissed off.
Yeah, that's fair. I was going to say, is that they're Nepo babies in poetry?
I mean... Wait till Jake's children are older. They'll be Nepo babies.
Yeah, those are going to be Nepo
babies. When Jake publishes his own children, that's when we'll have Nepo poetry babies.
Yeah, but it probably will be good, though. There'll be those Nepo babies where you go, actually, yeah,
I want to see Bad Betty Babies, the collection. I want that. Jake, give me that whenever you can. Give it to me.
So yes,
but yeah, what are you doing?
Yes. What am I doing? So Dead Darlings. Hopefully, I'm going to sort of bring back and try and kind of get more into a rhythm with that again, because that, you know, we just have a lot of fun, and it is that thing of documenting the scene. It is like being here, like talking to people and finding out more about the process and sort of trying to create that community in a slightly different way to you do with a night. And then yes, I'd quite like to get a collection off the ground at some point, and you know, I'd like to get this longer fictional project finished. So I did Glastonbury last year, which was amazing, and I would, as open applications, apply for it. It's something like poetryandwords.wordpress.com,
something like that. Yeah, you can Google.
Yeah,
and if you probably Google Glastonbury poetry, you can probably find something.
Yeah. Like you'll find, and it's worth doing. Like, go do it. But yeah, that was amazing, and I sort of off the back of that and having the pamphlet published, I thought, okay, you know, I'm going to go and go around. I was sort of saying to Tyrone, basically find a bunch of different cities, talk to their nights, go and try and feature as many nights, try and sell the copy of the book. That hasn't happened for various reasons, so I'm hoping to get my act together to do that pretty soon as well. But yeah,
talk to Kayla about that. Like, Kayla's been good at pushing themselves out there, and got a fair few gigs. Like, she's done there's definitely not jealous, but almost impressed part of me. It's like, you've actually managed to do gigs that even I haven't done, and
nice.
that sounds a little bit vain of going, even I haven't done it kind of vibe.
It slips out occasionally.
Oh yeah, no, fully. It's like, okay. It's like I mean, a lot of me doing poetry and seeing people get all these gigs, like, oh my god, you got that gig that you asked for that I never asked for. Oh wait, I never,
I see how that happened. Yeah. I think also there's something about, right, this is gonna sound like a backhanded compliment, but like, you've been around so long in the scene, right, that you have sort of seen people come up from being complete beginners to being kind of on a professional, semi-professional level, that there must be a kind of like, oh, you up here, okay, cool, yeah.
So the main thing with me, and this is where it goes partly vain, partly Tyron's weird competitive thing, is I have made it this far basically without asking for features. I am enjoying the, oh, you have heard of me kind of vibes, to that point of, well, I can fix this, my podcast, I can say whatever I want to. Like, I keep seeing Verbose in Manchester. I think that's like one of the Saboteur Awards, like best spoken word night. It sounds really good. I've done some other Manchester nights, but not that one. And it's like, oh, that's on my radar of things, and they've never booked me. But why would they never book me? But I'm me. But also, like, Kayla reached out to them, and other people are reaching out to them to get bookings, etc. And I've never reached out to them. And it's like, okay, that's on me then.
That'll do it.
Kind of thing. And like, obviously, different nights do things differently. And like, I'm saying the whole reach out and not reach out thing. Like, people have reached out to Process. Doesn't mean we always book them to reach out. So
yeah,
there's definitely a level of like, but have you not heard of me?
Yeah. So, and I mean, I'm very lucky in that I get to write in my professionally. I'm a journalist, so like, I remember sort of a few years ago having a chat with another poet who was like, well, do you not, is the goal not to be a professional poet full time? And I was like, actually, no, I quite like my day job.
Yeah.
And, you know, which I think is lucky because, you know, I don't think there's a lot of money in poetry. It's quite hard to, and people do. And I respect that. I don't think I have the capacity to do that, and you know, I rather enjoy my day job anyway. And I just, this memory of, I think it was outside Spoken Word London, this kind of sort of very starry-eyed younger poet just going, oh, I'm like, you lightweight, you sell out. I was like, well, you know, I like you know, I like being a journalist as well, which is a different form of writing. So yes, who knows?
But also getting a couple of gigs across the UK would not be a bad thing.
No, it wouldn't. It wouldn't at all. I think, yeah. So I just love doing it, and I just want to do more of it. I think I don't know that I have any. Like I said, I'd love a collection. Beyond that, I don't have any like ambitions for my poetry. Do you know what I mean? I love doing slams. Yeah. I don't really care if I win particularly, although I do like doing the Royal Albert Hall. So like, you're like, well, you have to win to get there. So at that point, I care if I win. But generally speaking, like I don't necessarily measure myself by slams.
Well,
so yeah.
Well, like both as you as both the podcaster and the poet, like, are there any nights across the UK that you can look at, go like, that's on the list of like, I need to get there at some point. I want to go check that out.
I mean, anything the loud poets. What did that again? Sorry, guys.
Yeah.
Anything the loud poets do up in Edinburgh, I'm always just absolutely in awe of, and I love them. They're just so fucking cool. Like I got to hang around with them at Glastonbury, and I felt like a fucking rock star. It was amazing. They're brilliant. They
are very good people, and when I was touring, when I was on tour and did their gigs, there was a long car ride where we spent. Almost like the car ride up was talking about wrestling and the car ride back was talking about D&D kind of vibe. Like, no, we're nerds.
Yeah,
we're nerds. This is the vibe. Yeah, they booked me to do the most northern gig possible. So because I did the gig in Edinburgh and the gig in Aberdeen as well, which was
nice.
Not a fun city.
Oh, okay.
I'm screw it. I love you, Scotland, but not Aberdeen.
Okay, Taryn's not going back to Aberdeen anytime soon.
No. Calling it what it is. Like the venue was lovely. It was a great night, but the city was. I mean, I think it's nicknamed the Grey City, and I was like, I see why.
Okay.
I see why. Any Bristol gigs on the return?
I would love to. So I grew up near Bristol. My parents still live down there. So yes, I would quite like to do that at some point. Just because I understand there's such a great scene down there, and I only really know Sam Grudging's on the Bristol scene, and he's fucking lovely as well. So I sort of would like to explore that a little bit more as well.
Yes, well, yeah, I think it's nice having the variety of, like, there are some poets on the scene that are taught to that level, like, I want to do this, this, and this, and here is my checklist, and it's like, good for you.
Yeah.
Good. But also a level of, like, I'm not quite just doing it for fun, but I'm just here for the ride kind of vibe.
Yes, yeah. I think I didn't expect it to take off the way it has, and I've had a brilliant time. I'm still enjoying the ride, really, and enjoying the writing and the feel of sharing your work with people. And you know, and I've had like a newer poem recently. Like I say, I've slowed down on the writing recently, and actually, having a newer poem out, it's that moment where kind of the thing that's been in your head for a while, and then the audience kind of goes, ooh, and they sort of appreciate what you're saying. It's just the best feeling of sort of a shared experience of connection. And I just love that, and I want to keep doing that.
I think, like, trust me, this is a good idea. And then when I put it out, it's like, see, it was a good idea.
Yes.
Okay, cool. Justified my months of thinking over this idea.
It's also not just me that found that funny. Good.
Yes.
I'm glad you guys laughed, because I thought it was funny, but, you know, I wasn't sure.
Yeah, no. There's definitely a few things like this would be a funny joke. If I can land this well, this is going to be great, etc. And like, but even with some of the old poems, like, it's still funny.
Yeah.
Cool. This
Yeah.
like,
you can forget a line is funny as well, because you've just heard it so many times, and someone laughs, and you're like, oh yeah, that was quite a good line, wasn't it?
Yeah. No, I also do it sometimes every now and then. Partly an audience admittedly, I performed it before, but it's like, oh, you didn't laugh this time. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Not going to judge you too much, but like, everyone else laughed at that line. You didn't, so feel like that's more a you problem than a me problem at this stage.
I tell you what, that was what was weird performing at Glastonbury. I will stop going on about the fact I performed at Glastonbury at some point in roughly about 2027.
Mum marathon, you Glastonbury.
Wow, yeah, it's about as cool as I will ever be. But yeah, performing in an open-sided tent where you've got kind of cabaret and acrobatics going on outside. It's really weird that, like, I think in a poetry gig's going very well, and you can almost taste what the audience is thinking. And you can't do it in an open-sided room where there's just noise filtering in. So I was spending the whole time going, I've got no idea if they're into this. I've got no idea if it's landing. I just, you can see people because obviously you haven't got lights in your eyes. You're just in a tent, but you're not getting those kind of non-verbal cues in the same way, or sort of atmospheric cues in the same way. And at the end, people applaud, and I went, "Oh, okay, yeah, no, you were into it. Good."
We might circle back to no. If I can, no, talk about it again. I can do whatever I want to. It's my podcast, not yours. Jesus Christ!
You fucking edited that.
That wasn't even a use. That was a. I keep referencing Trixie and Katya's Wow Presents thing, and their intro is. This is the show where we talk about whatever we want because it's our show and not yours.
Okay,
and I keep doing that every single time.
Don't know the context.
Yeah, but I keep saying this. It's my show, not yours, kind of thing all the time.
I had a bit of a phase of, Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and they say, rather than saying that's what she said, they say name of your sex tape, which is very funny but quite aggressive if people don't watch it and they don't know what you've just suddenly gone. Well, name of your sex tape. They're like, I've noticed I'm doing it a lot more and more now, especially with that one, and it's like, okay, cool, fine. I started doing it at a process. What I might have done at the next process, or I say, what I might have done at February process, especially because I'm featuring, or featuring, just featured. This is gonna be out after the next process. I'm telling you,
I know.
We are beings that exist outside of time.
As was discussed, I've got 4 episodes to edit. This is coming out after February's process. I'm telling you that now.
Good.
In January, me and Ellie, who hosts everything, we watched the Mean Girls musical, which is obviously based on the Mean Girls Brooklyn Nine-Nine's in my head now. Damn it, Broadway show. Broadway, not Brooklyn. Different things.
Close, but.
And one of the songs in it is the Regina George song, which starts off with, "My name is Regina George, and I am a massive deal." And I just want to go onto stage and kind of introduce myself like, "Hello, I am Tyrone Lewis, and I am a massive deal." And just do that as my intro, which is the level of like, there'll be 2 people in the room that will get the reference.
Yeah.
And everyone else will be like, "Oh, Tyrone's being vain again." But also that's funny as well in its own right, hopefully.
I had that when Taylor Swift's Folklore came out, that there's the one about like the widow, and her name's Rebecca.
Yeah.
And it's Rebecca. She had a marvellous time ruining everything. And I was like, I want to put that as a Facebook status, but I know what will happen is 3 girls from school that I haven't spoken to since about 2007 will pop up going, "You okay, hun? Here if you need it." And I was like, okay, never mind. I won't do that.
Yeah, and back in the day of like, when you'd occasionally put a Facebook lyric or Twitter lyric as like, "Here is how I'm feeling when I hide under a lyric," versus I just like this lyric.
Yeah.
And the fact that like, I'd switch between them. Yeah. So you'd never know.
Yeah.
Those vibes.
Anyway, so what were you going to ask me, because it's your show and not mine? It's a while ago.
I was going to go back into festival things. So like my festival vibes, I've not done many of them, but when I did, as a few performances, like obviously I had the tent thing of like, cool, how much people are listening and not. But I had the wonderfully weird thing of, because I indulge in the festival life and things, and in going to all the face painting, glittering, etc., a level of getting a whole glitter beard moustache thing going on, then going on stage and going, it's really hard to be a black man in the UK, and like, here's all our struggles, etc. Take me seriously, listen to me seriously, with a glitter moustache and all that going on. And it's like, didn't think that. Did we ever, like, how professional were you as the poet in Glastonbury?
I mean, I was there in the first, because I did 2 sets across the 3 days, and the first set, so when I do featured sets, I have this like sort of bolero thing kind of that I got for my wedding, which is all made of feathers, like sort of like a kind of 20s feathers thing. And so I have a poem called Fly about somebody growing feathers and flying away from a shit relationship. So I was like, oh, I'm never going to use this again, so I might as well use it for that. So when I do feature sets, I like to. It was so hot that day at Glastonbury. So I kind of have got this thing on, and I've got kind of these shorts, and it's just me and this thing, and I was so hot that I just looked like a very stressed like dove that's thrown into a window window or something and just ended up on the ground. Whereas I thought I'm going to be making it all cool. Like, yeah.
I almost regret for Halloween's process 2023. I dressed up as Ken from the Barbie movie, including the fur coat. And the room for protest is
that was warm.
Yeah, that's not a cool venue. Like, it's a cool venue, but it's not a cool venue.
No.
That fur coat was a mistake. I committed to it, but it was a mistake. Nah, yeah. I feel that vibe, but I'm glad you were able to live out that fantasy.
Yes, no, it was great. So yeah, no, it was just brilliant, and would thoroughly recommend it.
Perfect. Well, I think that covers enough of the timelines and tangents and all along that as well. So we're now going to go into our, Jesus Christ, let's talk about, I know what my sections are in my podcast, Jesus Christ.
Not mine.
We're going to go into our let's talk about section now. And again, there might be more tangents. Who knows? But let's talk about. Let's talk about podcasts. I think that's an easy one to start off with, and again, we'll see where Poetry Podcast and that talk goes, but obviously you've been one of the Dead Darlings podcasts for a while now. I'm not going to try and go into how long it's been, because it also makes me feel old, because I was one of the first guests on that, I believe.
You were as well, weren't you? Yeah.
So let's not even try to remember how old the podcast has been going for, because that's going to date me way too much.
Yeah.
But firstly, just in general, why start the podcast?
I love podcasts. I've been really enjoying them as a medium. So at the time I was working for a magazine called The Third Sector, and we started our own podcast there, and I was working with this fantastic production company called Rethink Audio that were helping us sort of do all the production, and we were in this very fancy studio in central London, and we had this incredible producer who I've forgotten her second name, that's going to annoy me. Anushka. Nope, it's going to and we had this incredible producer who helped us sort of put together the Third Sector podcast, and I sort of went, okay, I could do this. Like, and I'd done a couple of sound projects at university, so I knew how to use Audacity to edit it. And I just thought, yeah, all right, let's give it a try. And it was quite a conscious effort of like combining my work skills as a journalist with what I was doing for fun as a poet. And I think that's what you do, right? With all of Process Productions has been about kind of bringing your professional skills into the poetry arena. And I think that thing about kind of recording and capturing it, this scene that we have that is quite transient, that is quite kind of frayed around the edges, it's quite fluid, but there is some incredible art that comes out of it, and there are people that go on to sort of to be sort of leading artists within the UK, art in a broader sense, and be known and sort of be more mainstream. And I just think actually just capturing all of the stuff that's going on here, I think is really interesting. And also, I just like asking people questions. This is very weird as a dynamic, frankly. I'm more used to being like, okay, what do you think? You talk. Yeah, I think it was just an excuse to get poets that I really like and admire and be like, hi, tell me how you do it. Please give me all your secrets. And just to chat. And again, to kind of create that community that you get through a night, but sort of, more widely.
When going into that, when you were making the podcast, obviously it's kind of grown and developed over the years, but in terms of figuring out what the podcast is going to focus in on, because obviously there's a broad range of what poetry can be and what poetry podcasts can be as well.
Yeah.
What was it that kind of decided what you want the podcast to be? Because you have you still have the book reviews, don't you?
We still have the book reviews. Yeah.
So in terms of your sections putting in there, and kind of what was the thing this is what we want the podcast to look like? What kind of went into that?
Yeah, that was interesting. I mean, again, it's quite mapped on to the model of the Third Sector podcast. If you look at, not so much now, actually, obviously I don't work for it anymore, but even by the time I left, it changed a bit. But it's a little bit mapped onto the format that we got laid out for us with the Third Sector podcast. But also, I think I did where kind of it has evolved, I think, was because it was around about the time that sort of some of the more the newsier podcasts were starting. I had a friend who was working on The Economist's, that's going to annoy me, The Intelligence. It's the daily one from The Economist. You were getting those kind of more news-driven podcasts and those sort of more And I kind of had this idea that it was going to be very kind of time bound and monthly. And so we had the notice board section, which is like what's going on for different nights. And honestly, that got quite boring it was hard work to do. And you kind of realise, actually, after the month has gone, that's quite boring to listen to. And people aren't all listening to it in a timely manner.
Yeah.
They are going back and listening to it. And they've got this fucking great chunk of like what was on 2 years ago, and that's just silly. So we did kind of drop that relatively quickly. We now just do like what's a thing to look out for, which is also I have to get things edited in a timely order because otherwise they're just completely out of date. I knew I wanted to do an interview format. I like doing interviews. I like speaking to people. I became a journalist because I wanted to be a writer. And actually, I realised that the bit I really like, as well as the writing, is the asking questions, is the just getting to chat to people. It's just a license to go, yeah, okay, why? Why? How did that make you feel? It's just very, very satisfying. So I knew I wanted interviews. I knew I wanted to talk. I thought, talking about books would be good. And because we had Laurie on board, who is incredibly well read, he seemed like that seemed like a really good kind of outlet for that. We had the book reviews, and I wanted to have sort of live poems as well. So we will often have contributions from, and it used to be pre-pandemic, I would be going around to the events and just recording the whole event and just taking out the poems I wanted. I've sort of narrowed that down to just asking people to send me recordings of the poems just for kind of ease, really. But yeah, I sort of wanted that flavour of the live scene. This is the sort of stuff you can stumble into at an open mic and just go, oh, fuck me, I've never heard of this person before, but that's brilliant. I love this idea. I love this poem. I love what they're doing. It was kind of, and we've sort of tried to bring more poetry in because we used to have the guest doing one poem and then we were like, well, actually, I think we need a bit more to try and sort of bring as much of rather than just talking about the art, to also have the art there, I guess.
No, I always find that interesting because weirdly, when I was coming up with this level of one of my main things was I don't want to have poetry on it. I'm not doing poetry on it. Part of that admittedly was I've got a lot of friends in the creative things like producers, comedians, etc., actors, all that stuff. And this podcast is actively called the Process Podcast, not the Process Poetry Podcast. So that I have, so I kind of go, comedian friends come in, musician friends come in. And therefore I'm not going to lose a section if I get an actor to come in. Because them doing a monologue versus poet doing a poem, etc., and musician doing a song feels a bit weird to have as a section.
Yes, yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
So actively no, I want to keep this almost as neutral as I can do. But also I think my vibe with this was I want the conversations that you have in the interval and after a poetry night just to live online consistently.
Yeah, that makes sense.
We have so many... There's so many times when you go to a poetry event, and like we're talking about beforehand, the whole community side of it, you will spend a good half hour, if you can, after the night talking, etc. Those conversations can get deep, etc. The whole let's talk about section is no, but we do go into but what do you think about different nights and how they run it? Because we will be not judgmental, but let's share.
Everyone's got their favourite. Everyone's got, that's a really good idea. I'm not sure that worked. I don't quite get why they do this. And I think we've kind of got a bit of that going on with Dead Darlings as well, that we try and have. We've sort of introduced a hot topic thing because I wanted to have space for us to have a little bit of debate and see. And it's not really, we don't have a huge amount of social media interaction, to be honest. I was sort of hoping that might kick off, but let's just have a bit of a chat about things and sort of think about what's going on, because you do end up with sort of, there will be periods where there will be something that the entire community will be talking about. So, we've had sort of recent examples with stuff like gendered poetry awards, that kind of thing has been quite a big one. Shall I not put that? Should I not say that?
No. Tell me what I actually put on the podcast. I know it came up. I feel like my Kayla one was just after it, so me and Kayla vaguely skirted around it a little bit.
Okay. There will be stuff, or there will be, who runs certain nights, or what are the opportunities for access to national championships or something like that. Those kinds of things are stuff that people do discuss, and we kind of wanted to have that sort of that element of chat in it as well.
No, for sure. And I guess kind of as you touched on it as well, though, they're as the person who's kind of as the team of people that are running it, etc., and producing and making it as a podcast, obviously I think there's a element of poetry and poet-related things where we kind of almost not reject, but don't interact with capitalism in that kind of way. I want to kind of grow and be very community focused. But there is also the content creator, I'm making a thing, I want to be successful thing. How are you balancing that? How much are you viewing the podcast as, shit, I need to get content for the podcast at some point or whatever?
I mean, maybe when I started out, there was a bit of me going, wouldn't it be great if we could get like a Casper mattress deal? Obviously that's
insert
not gonna
ad here.
Yes. And, we've kind of talked occasionally about like, well, did we want to charge nights to advertise on it or anything like that? And it's just like, to be honest, that would be the effort for the return would be so little. And, I think, I sort of think artists deserve to get paid. It costs me money to produce it. But at the same time, like, it's never going to be my full-time job. Yeah. I would like to do it, actually, more than poetry, I think, as a full-time job. I'd like to do podcasting as a full-time job. But, yeah, it is just fun. It is DIY. We have a coffee account, and occasionally someone bunks some money into it to cover, hosting costs and stuff. But, yeah... Like, we're never going to make money out of it, and that's okay. And also, it's quite a niche audience, right? Yeah. It is always going to be a small audience. But, I do have people come up to me and go, oh, you run that podcast, don't you? I love it. Or, people I don't know of it and have heard it and like listening to it. And that's really lovely. And that's, that's worth it. Originally I kind of had this, it's going to always be out at the beginning of the month. Like I say, life has just been getting in the way, but eventually life will stop getting in the way, and I will have a bit more time to actually put it out on a more of a regular schedule. But that is very much self-driven and about the content. It's not about, okay, we've got to do it to an advertiser's schedule, because there isn't one.
I'm assuming then within that as well, like, so one of the things with podcasts I've noticed, and my part of my vibe is seeing, I'm a big YouTube person, I'm following a lot of YouTube stuff, and like there is a big rise in both video podcasts, but also what you'll see, it's worrying this is my first go-to one, but fuck it, it's the one I can think of at the moment, because I'm a big wrestling guy. I've been watching a lot of wrestling stuff, and recently they've had Logan Paul do a lot of wrestling stuff, which is annoying because he's really, really good. He's a massive dick, but he's a really, really good wrestler, which is really annoying. But also with that, like, because he's got his millions of fans, he also does his podcast, and that gets a lot of views. And like, it's things like Michael Rosenbaum has a podcast as well, etc. online and video stuff, and like a lot of them I'm noticing have, here is our YouTube for the podcast, and here's our YouTube for the podcast clips, etc. as well. And like that thing of the content thing of, if you want the long form stuff, you go here. If you want some short form stuff, you go there. Yeah. And podcasts do a case for like, ooh, you can just chunk this section out and do that. Like, I'm assuming time is definitely a big part of that. But you ever feel like playing the social media game, etc.?
I mean, I would love to. It is just time. And, you've got TikTok and things like that. And yeah, I think if you have the time and the kind of, the capacity, it is a full-time job. It's a social media manager's job, right, to be doing that. So yeah, it's something I kind of keep thinking, I should play with. I don't really have a lot of interest in recording it for YouTube, to be honest, which I know, I was teasing Tyrone about this before we started recording, just being like, of course you've got video, because it's cool now to record your podcast videos. And that is about YouTube monetization, right? And it is about it being kind of, sort of a good way to attract people to your content. I am just too, I'm a bit of a purist. Like there's a few YouTube channels I watch. I don't tend to watch YouTube's podcasts. I tend to have the podcast in my ears while I'm doing other things. And that is the beauty of podcasts for me. It probably marks me out as quite an elder millennial. Actually, that's probably what that is. It's I'm decrepit and falling apart. But yeah, I kind of, I quite like the audio element, and it's my podcast, not yours. Yes. To come back to that, it's very much it's I'm making a product that I enjoy. So I probably not the YouTube, but I kind of part of me does think, maybe we should record little bits of it and put it out on TikTok. I mean, actually, and this is even more analog. What's occurred to me, and it's one of those like mad ideas that won't go away. So I suspect we'll see how life breaks down later on. Part of me is like, I'd actually quite like to run like an old school kind of magazine-y blog for poetry. I think that'd be quite good fun to have features, to have news stories, whether it's, I think Substack newsletters are kind of the way, the way of doing that sort of thing at the moment. And I wonder if that might be a good idea in the future. So if anybody's interested in that, give me a shout and bully me into it, because I think that could be quite fun.
I mean, initial thought with that kind of thing, the moment you slap in as well some submission thing as well onto it, that's going to get you some traction, or people want to get a part of that kind of thing. Like a level of like, almost like come for the submission, stay for the also features involved in it as well kind of thing. I was like, cool, I can be like, I was using this I was published by these people. Also, there's a nice little interview here, whatever, nice little feature here.
There's an interview, there's some news stories about different things. Like, I think that could be quite good fun, and probably could be done on a sort of manageable scale. So that's something. The
zine life kind of vibe.
Yeah, I'm toying with. I mean, I think what you're saying about kind of monetization as well, it's worth to get really boring about it. That the podcast market a few years ago, and when it first started, when it was this young emerging market, it was very easy to start something in your bedroom and go on to have a following of hundreds of thousands and to be making money and to be living off the recordings and that sort of thing. That market has kind of shrunk dramatically in the last couple of years. That money just isn't there anymore. It's the big names, like you were saying, about the wrestling. Yeah. It's celebrities with a name who are the ones who are getting the big Spotify deals, who are the ones who can attract the audiences automatically, which means they can attract the advertisers, which means they can make a living off it, which is really depressing, but that's kind of how it is now. Do you know what I mean? I think it's...
So I've referenced him, I think I referenced him, I reference him in person to people. I might have referenced him on the podcast, like Connor McLeod, who... I was about to call him a former poet. No.
Wow. Can you be a former poet? That feels like a really interesting philosophical question.
Which am I going to like? So like, he is nowadays making a lot of his living and money off of YouTube. He's a Magic the Gathering YouTuber. Yeah. So he featured at my first book launch. I've known, and he came up in the Bristol scene, etc. But has now found his niche in doing Magic the Gathering specific YouTube content stuff, and that has seemingly taken off. Like, he found the right niche and the right audience. It's taken off. He gets, like, from last time I looked at it, like $1,000, $2,000, whatever, via Patreon, etc. For example. So it feels like a thing of, like, if you can find your Patreon niche, whatever, you can make something work there. But it's that thing of, like, this. I was having this conversation the other day with a friend of mine of, like, there are so many. We're in a world now where there's, in a good way, there's so many avenues and outlets that anyone can now be a podcaster. Anyone can put their music out online, etc., which is good. But there's so much of it that it's hard to rise above that initial
that noise
thing.
And I think, this is one of my Dead Darling co-hosts, Hannah Hutzber, this is one of her kind of pet theories. I think she's right, is that, we were saying about making money from poetry, there isn't actually enough of a market for many people to make a living. And what you tend to see happen is people they come from poetry and they go on into another art form to make it sustainable. So you've got, your Selena Godden goes on to write novels. I think Dean Attis, still a poet, but writing novels as well. Like...
Ellum's doing theatre, etc.
Yeah. Kay Tempest is doing more theatre.
Jack Rook's doing ITV, Channel 4 sitcoms, etc.
Yes, yeah. I had about this time last year, actually, I met Jack Rook and was trying to get onto a poetry conversation, but it was at the Broadcast Awards, which is, and he was talking to Lisa McGee at the time, as in the creator of Derry Girls, and they both very politely, they were like really nice, but when someone's smiling at you, like, please fuck off, we're having a really interesting conversation. So I did just fuck off. But yes, so yeah, like, I think there isn't that, way of sustaining a living off poetry in that same way. So people move into other art forms, which is brilliant for them, but not necessarily great for poetry. And, and I like Laurie would kind of say he loves this DIY. He's got this whole kind of punk DIY thing. And I'm like, yeah, that's great. I love it too. I think you should be doing it for the love of it, for the community. But a lot of this stuff, I'm like, look, I can't justify spending as much of my free time on it. Yeah. Whereas if I could quit my job and just do the podcast, that would be fantastic. That ain't going to happen. And that's kind of okay.
And then obviously with all of this stuff as well, you've with you obviously going to some events and like filming small snippets, not film the whole show, but then take out snippets, actually, like, I always find the podcast thing an interesting one, because obviously it's more than just the audio kind of thing, because it is building a show around it, because obviously in theory you could just film a live show.
Yeah. Does
that work as a podcast? Would that work as a podcast? I mean,
The Moth does it, don't they? So have you ever heard The Moth?
I don't listen to podcasts. No.
Sorry, that sigh is going to come out really loud on the audio.
To be fair, I listen to podcasts. I listen to D&D podcasts.
Okay, fair. Yeah, I mean, so like The Moth is a storytelling night that started in New York, and they put up a podcast, and and that, again, that was kind of one of that sort of early adopter podcast things. And it is pretty much, they have a host that will say, it's storytelling on stage. So it feels very much like a poetry night. It's somebody getting up and telling a true story from their life. But obviously there's an element of the storytelling craft going on. It is a honed and edited story that they've sort of told from memory, but, they've planned it. And they will have maybe 3 stories across the episode of a podcast. And there will just be, the host will say, hello, welcome to the podcast. First, we've got somebody from our Brooklyn night who told this story. And they might have a little bit of detail afterwards, but it's just intro, poet, intro,
But nevertheless,
story.
Edited down so it's not just verbatim, here is the live event.
No, not the whole event. It's this story and this story. So there'll be about 10 minutes each sort of thing. So you could do it. I think live event, because we've got recordings of, say, like Jake's birthday gig. And part of me's like, we could just do it as an episode. And we tried to do it with Laurie's book launch. So Laurie was one of the unfortunate poets who'd scheduled his book launch for March 2020. It didn't happen. So after the pandemic, he did a big event for everyone that had a book that had come out during the pandemic to have a joint live launch, which was great. And I tried to record it, and it was in the Miller, which is one of the few like wheelchair accessible pubs in London. And you could just hear the noise from the main room of the pub, and it just was awful. So yeah, I don't know if it would work. I think you would have to structure it and script it very tightly so that the presenters of the night, the hosts of the night, were speaking to the podcast in some sense. Like,
it's my whole... So it's my whole thing with doing like online... No, not online events, but doing live streamed events. That's the way of phrasing it, Tyrone.
Yeah.
Where having a visual... Like, having the physical cameras to physically live stream it is one thing.
Yeah.
But your audience watching online, like, is it catered for them in any way?
Yeah, how do you get them involved? How do you make it feel like not just a random kind of camera sort of in the back
there's a difference between we've put a camera in the back of this room here versus we built it for live stream, and
you're accidentally spying on a poetry night.
And like obviously this is the way I think it's different in your theatres and comedy stuff, because especially with open mics, as my like caveat here, but like because open mics aren't a show in the same way that tightly knit 1 hour show, 2 hour show is a start, middle, end thing.
Yeah.
They feel much easier to just, I've got a camera in the back of the room because it's built that start, end, and finish. You're going to be fine here. You're just an audience member. You're not interacting with it.
Yeah.
But open mic nights kind of are built around some level of interaction.
Yeah.
It feels that like, because as I was saying beforehand, my podcast, I can do this in the middle of my podcast. Like, I am playing up the idea of, because I've got the feed directly from the mic from Process. Yes. Is that an episode? Can I do that as an episode?
I think that could work. I mean, I think because the audio quality is a big one, right? Like I was saying. And I think if you've got it linked in, I think it is just something about making sure that your intros are sort of formal enough. Because like at nights, you can kind of, way, everybody, nobody knows that you're waving your arms around doing something funny and the crowd shut up and then you're sort of, pulling a face at Ebullient and he's pulling a face back kind of thing. Like, you need to kind of just make sure that you're sort of, talking to people who, it's sort of scripted relatively tightly. I think it could work. I think it could. It's
one I'm playing around with, and in the many things that Tyrone is doing this year. But I guess on this, to bring it back to you and your podcast, like, are there like, what is the like? I know you kind of touched on the future section, but like plans for the Dead Darling podcast going forward. Like, do you have any like big goals, dreams, or anything?
One thing we'd like to do, and we've talked about doing it at Edinburgh at some point. But obviously, like an Edinburgh show gets quite expensive. What we were sort of thinking of doing is going to Edinburgh and just
live show.
Well, recording poets who are there, or trying to find somewhere where we could invite a couple of people in and just record an episode. And if we get an audience, we get an audience. If we don't, it's kind of okay.
Because you told us from a podcast episode.
Yes. So try and do PBH Free Fringe or something like that. But I don't know how well that would work. The other thing we've talked about is trying to take it on tour around. And I'm quite up for this. And again, it's just about when we have capacity for it, because we all have other jobs. But, and we were sort of thinking, okay, well, we come to your poetry night and what do you want from Dead Darlings? And I thought, okay, we could do a set, between us, like one sort of normal set, just divvy it up between three of us, and then maybe sit and interview your podcast, your night host. So if somebody runs a night in Bristol, we go and say, okay, let's talk to you about your journey into poetry as part of like a Q&A at the end of the night or something like that. And that would give us a little bit of like, we're adding something for that audience and we're getting an episode out of it. It's still very loosey-goosey, but that's kind of what we're thinking.
Michael Bolger of Poetry Takeaway fame and work. I don't know why I said fame first, but whatever.
It's famous. It's very famous.
Had mentioned to me at one point a level of like, because I started mentioning I was doing more podcast stuff. It's like, oh, whenever you want to, you can do a Poetry Takeaway podcast. And it's like, I don't know what that looks like though.
Ooh, what would that look
exactly,
like?
Because it's like, so I don't know, like, so much of it would have to involve talking to some of the people that come into the takeaway, etc. And like,
getting them on mic. I suppose you could, you could get them to say what the brief is, and then have the poem and then have someone talking about how they did it, maybe?
Like, it feels more like a YouTube short video thing.
Or a TikTok.
Yeah, kind of thing, than a full-on podcast episode. Like, that YouTube thing of, here is a nice little 10-minute video of, like, a vlog.
Yeah.
It's a YouTube vlog of, like, here is a day in the life, etc., where you see someone have the interview, cuts to bits of that, cuts to bits of people working in the banter, etc. But I don't know what the podcast part of that is.
I mean, I don't know about a regular podcast. I could see a one-off podcast about, like, how do you make poetry? Because I love the idea of doing the poetry takeaway, and you've invited me to do it a couple of times, and I've always been busy. It also scares the living shit out of me. I'm
doing it on Monday, Jesus. Well,
genuinely scares the shit out of me. And I wonder it'd be quite good to do it. Okay, how do you make up poetry?
Oh, yeah.
Like almost like a kind of Radio 4 show, right? You could imagine it being a kind of Radio 4 show of like, here are the poets that make up poems on the spot. How do you do that?
I mean, that's part of the thing with some of this stuff. Like, what idea is this is a one-off idea? What idea is that this is a thing that can be repeated, etc.? Like,
and who are the people that can talk about their process really well?
Oh, I can't.
do you know what I mean? Like, it's very hard to talk about your process because sometimes you just go, well, I don't know. It's like when people say, where do your ideas come from? And you're like, I don't know. I just have them. Like,
I watch a lot of media and I get my ideas come from, this will be a dumb joke. Whereas
there are lots of people you'd want somebody that could talk quite articulately about, like, okay, we're starting with this. Here's where my brain went, and here's how we ended up with this poem. And so
I think that's ironically part of why I've actively structured this podcast to not be me interviewing poets in that kind of a way, because I don't know the questions to ask them. Like, what was your process? I don't fucking know. I don't know what my process was to ask you what your process was. Like, we'll talk again. I find almost we're chatting shit over the ins and outs of the poetry world rather than going like, tell me your creative process, because I don't know that shit.
It's community rather than craft, isn't it? I guess. Yeah, and you know, we have at the end of our interviews, we have some standard questions and then we tailor them.
Yeah.
But one of the ones that we've tried to get in, because we want to be able to kind of have a little bit of craft on the podcast, is have you got a piece of writing advice you'd like to share with our listeners? And that one is very interesting in that either people will come up with quite a nice kind of like, here is a prompt or here is an activity, or they'll say something like, go and see trees. And you go, okay, I get it. I don't know how, but you like, and yes, or, be nice to yourself, which actually can be really, really fucking valid writing advice. Like, but
it's a little, I don't say generic, but it's a bit too open. The thing of like, I mean, it's like, I love what you're doing here, but also that's not.
Yeah,
but what's that? What does that actually mean?
Yes, yeah, but then for some people that can be really helpful.
Some people need a practical thing to do.
You need a balance of the practical. Here's a prompt, and then I don't know what piece of advice I give out. So
because Lad Poet has been mentioned, and I will always bring it up because it's still my favourite thing with them. When they were doing some of their Patreon stuff, if you subscribe to their Patreon to a certain tier back in the day, I can't remember if they still do it now, but at least back in the day, it was if you subscribe to us in this tier, you can get us to do a writing challenge, etc. or whatever. Yeah. So I gave them a writing challenge and they hated me for it. It's a writing challenge I've been doing a fair bit, and Faye Roberts is the first person I did it with, and at Allographic.
Is this Lemons?
No, this is my Skater Boy writing challenge.
Ah, okay.
So the premise of it is all about specificity. I always like specificity in poems. As much as I am known as a reference guy, I think part of that is because I just love being specific about stuff. And for me, it's lovely to mention, here is a specific TV reference and get you in, here's a good visual, etc. I love making it a unique thing. Making it not just, don't just tell me this boy's wearing a t-shirt, tell me this boy's wearing an Adventure Time t-shirt kind of thing. Give me a bit more specific to it, to colour it, etc. On that, it meant that when I was doing a writing challenge, because I'm a big fan of Avril Lavigne, he was a boy, she was a, can I make it any more obvious? Yes, you can. Make it more obvious. Fucking make it more obvious, etc.
Did you get that one published in the end? Because I
did that. Yes, Skater Boys in.
Did you have to pay them?
No, I didn't.
Okay, because this is the problem with if you publish poetry, you have to. If you publish quotes from songs, you have to pay royalties.
It's a whole. So I mean, part of that was a whole weird one of like, where does that line between reference and common sentences go?
Yeah,
etc.
fair usage and
fair use in the level of like, you can't. What's gonna call it? You can't trademark whatever. He was a boy.
Yeah,
that's not a. that's too generic a sentence to
Yeah.
copyright, to make your own thing, etc. And admittedly, like, keywords which we're going to make it obvious, you can probably just... It's almost on that line of like...
Okay, sorry, who is listening to this and doesn't have the tune in their head,
Yeah,
right?
but like, yeah, but it's the thing, like, it's too generic a thing to properly trademark
Yeah.
into it. It's the thing, like, how... I don't know whether... It didn't flag anything when we were doing it, etc.
cool.
It's at least the very thing, but like... But yeah, that I was playing on the idea of like, let's be specific about it, and therefore give me... The writing challenge is, give me specifics about these people, tell me about them, give me a story based on them, and make it unique to these people, etc. So tell me about this boy, tell me about this girl, what is their relationship, what are they doing here, what is the thing they're doing, etc. Because you can make it fucking obvious.
Yes, yeah.
And that was the challenge, which, yeah, they did not like, because I did also, like, and to be fair, what I also do in a challenge, just to make it more fun, because with most of the people I do it for are millennials, is, but also give me some Avril Lavigne references in it, because that's fun to do. And you'll get a couple of complicated references or something like that in it, etc. Or girlfriend, whatever, yeah. Which is just, because I like a reference. We love that. But yeah, they were not happy that I gave them that as a writing challenge. But it did born, if anyone wants to know how I write poetry, I'm not saying it is exactly how I write poetry, but Katie Ailes did a wonderful video as part of the Lad Poets series, because whenever they got writing challenges, they'd also do a video of like, here's how we'd approach this writing challenge, which is a freaking useful resource. But it means that the video online of Katie Ailes dressed in her perfect pop punk 15-year-old era, describing how to write a pop culture poem, etc.
That's amazing.
It's a really good video, and it's a really nice way of bringing in pop culture with references. But yeah.
No, there was a fabulous, and I hesitate to recommend this book because the author ended up being quite racist in her next book and got herself cancelled. It was Kate Clancy. I don't know if you saw anything about this on Twitter. Oh. So she wrote the book she wrote is How to Grow Your Own Poem. Yeah. And that's great because what she does is she takes poems that are kind of working to a particular structure or have got a particular format, and she goes, okay, here's what's going on in the poem. Write your own on another subject. Here are two from my students. So you can kind of see what other people have done with the poem, which is brilliant. I caveat that. So, like, borrow this book off somebody if you can, but I wouldn't necessarily give her money because she wrote another book which is like a memoir of teaching. And she basically went on Twitter and said, oh, somebody's giving me these horrible reviews on Goodreads and they're calling me racist and it's really bullying. Can people just go on?
I might have seen that.
Yeah, can people just go on and write something, nice about it? And then people went and looked at a book and went, actually, mate, this is pretty racist.
I did see that, and that got a couple of, because there was a couple of writers that got involved in it.
Yeah, that tried to really sort of stick up for her, and she kind of, and it, like, some of the stuff, it was like, it was quite unpleasant, and you were like, yeah, I think it might say something about quite how white publishing is, that nobody picked up on this. So, like, borrow How to Grow Your Own Poem. I'll lend you a copy. But yes, that was very clever as a format, as a way of explaining poetry. Yes.
Yes, going from there, I think that will end on the recommendation. We'll end our Let's Talk About section there. As we now go into the questions section, we're going to go into the fun of slow fire questions. So for slow fire questions, I've got my list of 100 questions in front of me. I will keep arbitrarily saying 5 because fuck it, my podcast. This is the tagline for the podcast. Now, fuck it, my podcast. That'll be on good posters. But yeah, we'll go through 5 questions and give me numbers at random, and we'll go through them. And yeah, the whole point of this is I've already had you a version of quickfire questions beforehand. There might be us doing quickfire questions later. We'll see.
As you said, like last time I did this was about 6 or 7 years ago now. So like,
updated versions of this. But yeah, no. Obviously, with the quickfire questions, there are some questions that I think are genuinely good questions that I want to go deeper on. Not all of them are genuinely good questions, but...
Okay.
So yeah, give me a random number between 1 and 100, please.
67.
Cool. Then we're going to start off with favourite quote.
Oh, that's too hard. I'm going to kick myself. The minute I come out of here, I'm going to be like, oh, no, this is my all-time favourite quote. But... I tell you what's been knocking around my head a lot recently is I've got very into Emily Dickinson recently.
Yeah.
Hope is the thing with feathers that perches on the soul and sings the song without the words and never stops at all. I'm kind of writing a poem about how I think she's sort of wrong in that poem. 'Cause she says at the end, it never asked a crumb of me. Hope does ask a lot of you. It does. And it costs you to hope and you do it anyway. So I'm sort of halfway through a poem replying back to that, but I do just love that bit of a poem. That's going to annoy me because that is not my favourite quote ever, but I'll think.
Wait, I don't know what my favourite one ever is, but at least one of the ones I go back to is, again, my cliches of Ferris Bueller, life moves pretty fast. If you don't stop and look around once in a while, you could miss it.
I actually know that was Ferris Bueller.
Yeah, no, Ferris Bueller. Yeah, Ferris Bueller's got a fair few decent quotes like that. So that's definitely one that goes, again, not so my favourite, but it's the fact that it's one I can go back to so regularly is level of, that's up there for me. There's something about, if I can go back to it that easily, then it means something to some degree.
Yeah.
Another number, please.
15.
15. We are going for who would play you in a movie?
Ooh. I don't know.
I annoyingly know it'd be John Boyega for me, and I would hate that so much. Like, nothing wrong with John Boyega. He's a beautiful, lovely person. But that would just... I went to school with him.
I was going to say, didn't you go to school with him?
That'd just be like, oh, that's mean. I mean, admittedly, if we're going to the time I'm getting a fucking movie, then I'm probably big enough that's fine. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. See, I think Jennifer Lawrence is like a year younger than me. So when she's like winning the Oscar age 26 or whatever, I'm like, oh, fuck off. Yeah, she's obviously much, much prettier than me, but like people in films generally are, right? That's the point. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, let's fuck it. Jennifer Lawrence.
There. Cool. Another number, please.
91.
91.
I'm
then
making
going,
you scroll all the way up and down the list.
Favourite song?
Oh.
Whether
I've forgotten all songs I've ever heard.
Whether at the moment or of all time, you can pick whatever caveat you want to go for.
Okay, all right, hang on. Let me think back, because I do Desert Island Discs regularly. What would I have as my Desert Island Discs? Maybe that's an easier way of doing it.
Some level of Desert Island Discs, some level of what does Spotify keep saying you listen to.
Yes, what does Spotify think my favourite song is? Do you know what? It might be Tracy Chapman's Fast Car.
Yeah.
I just love it. I grew up on... as a teenager, I was on a solid diet of Eva Cassidy and Tracy Chapman. And so I know, particularly with Eva Cassidy, there'll be a lot of songs I'm like, why do I know this? I'm like, I know the Eva Cassidy version. Yeah. So yeah, that's kind of one of the all-time greats.
I mean, again, Tracy came back into our conversation again with the Grammys and all of that.
Yes.
Which we love. Weird that it's not on YouTube. I hate that. Okay?
Yeah.
It's my pet peeve, but that's not my thing to talk about. But yes, another number, please.
44.
44. Then we are going for... Would you watch a Netflix show about poetry?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I thought Life and Rhymes was great. They should have done another series. Apparently they were in talks too, and then it didn't happen. And then obviously Benjamin Zephaniah left us, unfortunately. But yeah, no, or like, are we thinking like a Netflix drama?
Well, this is the... So
is this a Netflix drama?
So I've actively left it as a Netflix show about poetry, and then with that, obviously the thing of like, what are we doing is... So like, I think the three options are, you do Life and Rhymes, which is just basically we're filming our own new event.
Yeah.
We've got the documentary version where you can do a documentary on poetry, which is... I
mean, this is... You would like a Netflix commission for the documentaries you've already made.
Yes, obviously, yes.
Yep, cool.
And then the third version is basically...
If you're listening, Anne Menser.
And the third version was not saying this is the tone, but the third version would be Glee but poetry.
Glee but poetry. I think Glee but poetry could work. I think we're all messy little people. And, there've been enough like feuds and dramas and people being lovely to each other. I think it'd be more Ted Lasso. I think it would end up quite Ted Lasso.
Well, so like, I think theme-wise it'd be more Ted Lasso. I say Glee with poetry in as much as my pitch to Netflix, Prime, Disney, whatever it is, I think there's a lot of mileage you can get out of a show where Glee would do a musical song break, whatever. You have a poem break, which is both realistic but not realistic vibes.
Yes.
I think there's a lot of fun in that. And
I think that would be fun as a writing challenge. I mean, I think if you've got a really good writer in there where you could see where lines from a poem had come from the episode.
Yeah.
And like I think that could work.
But yeah, like I think there was something in that personally, and like you will get a couple of like with Glee and some of the Glee covers obviously became mainstream hits in that kind of a way. You get a couple of good poems. It's like, oh, this poem has hit really well. And actually becomes out a viral sensation in of itself. And it's like, I think there's something in that, but I don't. It's a lot of work to do, and you have like a bitch of a writer's room to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I occasionally like have to talk to TV commissioners for my job, so I'll mention it.
That's on my list of things that work. Like, I mean, there's probably other ways to do a poetry show. I have had my podcast with George Lawrence, a lot of us talking about how we'd do something like that, I think in some way, kind of thing. Yeah. There's something that could be done.
Yes.
It's one of the few mediums that has not properly been tapped into yet. You had a bit of a...
And it's often the butt of jokes, right? Like there was, and particularly I feel like the kind of sort of early 2010s, there were a lot of jokes in Hollywood films about poetry slams with the clicking, and because people think the clicking is like jazz clicking and just people just doing it at random. Like there were a lot of jokes about poetry slams, but I don't know that kind of. But I feel like people know what it is more now. Than
and like it's like I am pleasantly surprised that Brandon Leake won America's Got Talent. I want to say over the pandemic. With spoken word poetry.
Yes.
And I'm surprised that didn't cause a different level of a boom. I think partly because it was pandemic, there wasn't the chance to follow it up properly.
But then, we had Amanda Gorman at the Biden inauguration, all of that kind of... There has been, I think, more conversation about poetry than previously. And I think when I tell people I do spoken word poetry now, I get, oh, cool. Whereas I used to get like, sorry, what?
You're gonna get when Taylor's new album drops, because there's something poet related in. I have not looked at it, but like there's something about poet, just like tortured poets, something cool. This is how uncool I am when I don't know the Taylor shit. I'm sorry, people. Like for all of my mainstream stuff, that's my Taylor's my blind spot. I don't keep up to date with her. Sorry.
That does surprise me, actually. I have to say, it's very surprising.
I like her songs. I do listen to them. I will listen to some of her albums. I have not listened to all of the Taylor's version stuff.
Fair.
That was my not jumping off point, but I can't keep up.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in a funny place emotionally, so I've had to limit. It turns out Taylor Swift goes in the same bracket as Joni Mitchell. That when I'm sad about my heart, I can't necessarily listen to Joni Mitchell. Much as I love Joni Mitchell, and actually, there's a lot of Joni Mitchell songs that would be up there but I have to limit it, and I think Taylor Swift is in the same category. What
I am enjoying, though, for all of the not good things she is responsible for, part of, like, there's a whole... This is going to be out of date by the time this comes out, but there's a legal case in the moment now, because there was someone who was tracking her private jet flights, etc., and was making a whole thing about how much carbon and oil, etc., whatever she was using, and Taylor was suing them for stalking her. And that thing of like it's that thing of like it's some level of public data you're suing over, and
that's
the whole
very
thing of
messy and very interesting.
And the whole thing is like they're making a point about the environment and Taylor not being pro-environment in that kind of way for using that many things. And so there's a lot of things that Taylor's not good at, but I'm also really kind of enjoying from afar watching how many people care about American football now that Taylor's designated an American football person. It's like, oh, Taylor's bigger than football. Okay.
Yes, and how angry certain American football men are about it. And I'm like, why? People are watching your thing.
Yeah.
Come and watch your thing. So Taylor could have Taylor needs to date a poet next.
Yeah. This way that if Taylor's album does talk about poetry, that there will be a bit of a poetry boom thing, whatever.
Yeah.
I am the fact that like Warsan, who was
Shiro,
she used to be a roundhouse poet. Back in the day, kind of thing, and I think of like
we know Warsan Shiro.
Well, I mean, I knew her.
Sorry, that was mean of me.
But that thing of like, cool, she was able to be on Beyonce's album. Like, cool, there was use of it in the mainstream.
Yeah,
but not quite fully mainstream. Yeah, it's not been a consistent mainstream thing. But yeah, no, Netflix show could work. Last question, last number, please.
Ooh, 6.
Number 6, we are going for, this is a simple, easy question. Page poetry or performance poetry?
Oh, for what? What's the context? Make it more obvious, Tyrone. I don't understand.
Page poetry or performance poetry? There you go. That is your option.
Okay. I mean, at least this one's not about music. I'm not a musical person. It's embarrassing. Like, if I could sing, I'd be a folk singer. That's not quite true. Both. I think they both have their places. My hackles go up when people shit on performance poetry. And I think there is a bit of a feeling, and this is something we end up chatting about on the podcast quite a lot, because often it's shit that's niggling away in my brain that I just start asking people about on the podcast. That's how I work through my issues and ask other people about them. But like this thing of, there was a bit of a feeling, probably not quite so prominent now, but for a while of, you start on performance poetry and then you grow up and get serious and do page poetry, to which I say, fuck off. Like, if you want to move into more pagey poetry, and particularly, obviously getting published, everybody wants to have a book out, right? Like, you do. And stuff that works on stage doesn't necessarily work on page as well. That doesn't make being on page better than being on stage. And I think being able to do both and to be able to think about language in both ways is really important. So I don't see it as an either or, and I don't see one as being better than the other. While accepting that, okay, stage poetry sometimes may need a bit of an edit to work better on page, that's fine. Sometimes page poetry doesn't work as well on the stage as stuff that's written for it, because you can't circle back to stuff. So yeah, I both.
I struggle with poetry readings because they're just so...
Oh, it's serious poetry voice, isn't it? It's,
bad.
I am reading my poem, so you know it's important because I'm talking to you like this.
I think my overall thing with both of them is that I like both. I mean, I'm definitely lean more towards performance more, because as the joke is, I don't read much. But no, I lean towards performance more. I think my thing overall is level of, like, I think both are good. My issue with any of them is if you're not doing them properly. Like, you can't just one-for-one port your performance poem to a page, and vice versa. You can't just one-for-one port your page poem to the stage. Like, know the art form you're working in. That's almost weirdly going back to the podcast thing. Like, know the art form you're working in, to know, like, cool, this needs me to do this thing, and like, this works well in this format, this works well in that format, this needs that, etc. If I'm going to be on the stage, I need to entertain my audience, which poetry readings, in my opinion, do not do.
I mean, I went to a poetry reading, and I realised I was sort of in a different crowd to my usual crowd when it got to the end of the first poem, and I went, woo! Like you do, and everybody else went, and I was like, oh shit, wrong crowd.
I have no issue with both of them. Be a level, if you're going to do either of them, do them properly.
Yeah.
I think it's the vibe, and don't shit on the other.
Yeah, I think it's the hierarchies I find difficult there.
Where the hierarchies and the thing of, like, there's no strict divide. I think the divide is more the level of, like, for me personally, my divide is, this poem is going to be one that I perform more often than I don't. Yeah. This one works better written down. Yeah. That's my page versus performance thing of, like, not every poem is going to... I'm not exclusively doing one or the other. It's not like, well, now that I've written for the performance, I can't be a page poet ever again. Yeah. Or anything like that.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you for joining me on the podcast.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
This is where I did a wrapping up section. I don't have a wrapping up or ending thing, but what I will do is, could we have a camera? If you've got any socials and you want to be found on any socials, plug away. Do the dropping of names and things.
Plugging away. Okay, so you can find the podcast, Dead Darlings Podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. We're also at Dead Darlings Pod on Twitter and Instagram, and Dead Darlings Podcast on Facebook. For me personally, I'm at Any Name But Becky on Instagram. I don't put a lot of poetry on Instagram, to be honest. It's mostly just, it's largely photos of my cat at the moment, if I'm honest. But
people like the cat stuff.
He's a very cute cat. So yeah, at Any Name But Becky, and I'm Rebecca K. Cooney on Twitter. I'm not fucking calling it X. And Rebecca K. Cooney on TikTok as well. My poetry collection, my poetry pamphlet, I should probably plug that. My poetry pamphlet is called Where the Lights Come On. It's published on Allographic. You can find it in the links on my socials or at RebeccaKCooney.bigcartel.com.
Yeah. If you're watching this, then you know that we're Processed. We've got our links and all our bios, so let's go to those. I will keep joking that one day we'll maybe get a Threads account or LinkedIn account, but that's never going to happen. It's not. And thankfully, Kayla is not of a persuasion to even go for TikTok either. That's not going to happen either. As much as I like my content, I'm not doing TikTok content.
I bloody love TikTok, but it takes so long to make anything on it. I cannot be asked. And I mean, the kids are all right, and the kids have fucking high production values and a lot of patience.
It's the one social thing I've just gone, no, this is too much for me. I have reached my limit. Like,
I love it.
Oh, I forgot what the freaking wording is. Like Murphy's Law. It wasn't Murphy's Law, but something like the
Murphy's Law is Sod's Law.
No, but yeah, there was that thing where like there was a law about like when.
Oh, I think it's Douglas Adams came up with that, you know. I think it's about when stuff comes out. If it's around when you're young, it's the way things have always been. If it comes out between sort of your 20s and your being about 35, it's new and innovative and brilliant. And if it comes in after that, it's like, weird and alien and too far.
And like with that as well, there's a point of like, cool. My mum's thing back in the day was like her cool thing to keep her young. This is my long outro. Yes, I know.
We're rambling. What a shock.
My mum's thing was like when she was cool and young as the young cool mum was like, I know all the members to take that. It's like, that's not cool anymore kind of thing. But like that thing of like, cool, I've got a finger on the pulse of pop culture and no.
It fucking moves. This is the problem. It moves.
Yeah, so it's like...
I think I know what I'm doing and then it changes.
I was cool. I can see like, I have not stopped, but like, I have started to take a backseat. No, TikTok is like a card. But find us on all the other socials. Patreon, come to our poetry night. I don't know when this is coming out, but there'll be a poetry night soon after this. You might
come to Process. It's lovely. It's just a lovely night.
That was more in my head level. This is a podcast that will live online for a while. Therefore, there's no point plugging in a specific date because it will be on.
It is always the last Tuesday of the month, isn't it? Though,
except for October because of Halloween.
Fair.
And December because Christmas. But that's not as spiffy a way of promoting it as just like every month. Point is, Process. All the things if you've listened this far, good on you.
You've found us.
Like praise to you. You like this a lot, so thank you. But also, as is the cliche, I love you all, but now fuck off. Bye.